that feeling, that dull feeling. But so what I want to start with right now is, isn't there something that you've seen on the news and you turn on and you go, God, I'd like to change that about the world? Isn't there something you open up the newspaper or you see a movie and you think, oh, I wish I could change the direction and the trajectory in which we're going? And the answer is you can. But it's not the way that we always think of. And but I always tell people, and I'm an activist. I've marched in the streets, I've stood in front of a bus, I've had machine guns pointed at my head, I've been an activist. But if you want to change the world, you have to do the marching in the streets and Wall Street. Money moves things. And as people ask me all the time with my activist and humanitarian point of view, how is peace possible? And they don't like the answer, but I always tell them peace will be possible when it is as profitable as war. When you really think about that and you understand what transforms this world, what makes movements possible, what allows whole demographics of people who are disenfranchised to suddenly hold power, it's finance. If you think about the blood in your system and what a stroke is, it's when it gets too stuck in one place. And that's what happens also when money isn't moving. We don't really think about what is money, but one of the best lessons that I was ever given was something that my father showed me, and he was the CEO of Sun 11, so he came with that finance background, and he showed me $1 one day. He said, what is this? I said, it's $1. He said, wrong. What is this? I said, it's paper. Wrong. What is this? It's energy. So when somebody is going and planting a bunch of lemon trees in a row, they're putting the energy into the planting, they're putting the seeds in there, they're putting the investment of time growing that. And then when I had my little lemonade stand, I would buy those lemons, I'd make the lemonade with the sugar that was harvested, put all that other stuff into it, and meanwhile maybe a gardener came by and he had put all his sweat equity in making all these roses grow, and that energy was represented in the $1, and that money was an exchange energy. The problem is today, in the world that we live in, the majority of women do not hold a good deal of money. And yet, it's been proven by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in our lifetime, women, whether you're in the middle of the Amazon, or whether you're in Manhattan or London, we give 70% back into the community from what we gain in our lifetime. Really think about that. So when the United Nations said, how are we going to make it possible for our species to continue in the world, one of the main things they had to tackle was, how do we get more money in women's hands? But as I always tell women, we don't get off the hook, because we have to ask ourselves, well, why are we raising our sons differently? Why aren't they putting 70% back? So what are we as a society doing right? What are we doing wrong? And how can we change that? But I want to share a story with you. And this is very true, this is real, it happened. We're going back into the 1920s. My grandfather used to be in charge of what was called Negro Day at the State Fair of Texas. This is back when there was a Ku Klux Klan Day, just to put it in perspective. And he would meet people that would work, and there was a limited amount of time at the state fair. And so he noticed people had a really good work ethic, and he'd say, hey, when the fair comes to an end, I want you to come work with me. And so when he would see a good worker, he'd say, come on, work with me. Well, over time, he ended up promoting people of every race that just happened to be good. Well, then my father, the strawberry, blonde, blue-eyed boy, came of age, and my grandfather said, I want you to apprentice under whoever happens to be the best at the job. Maybe it would be tending cows, maybe it would be delivering ice, whatever it was. And sometimes the person who was the best at the job was a brown-skinned person, a black-skinned person, Native American, or Asian. Well, the local Ku Klux Klan chapter didn't like that, because suddenly they saw this blonde, blue-eyed boy apprenticing under a black person. And so they burnt crosses, sometimes 20 to 30 to 40 in the front yard. And my family had to deal with the terror of seeing those fires in the yard, never knowing when that might end up killing the whole family. And my grandfather, he wasn't trying to make a statement. He was simply trying to make good business sense. And sometimes the person that was the best at the job happened to be someone that wasn't white. Well, over time, he ended up finding himself in the fight for desegregation. And there was an amazing man that came to him and said, and his name was George Dawson, and he wrote a book called Life's So Good. But at the time, he couldn't read or write, and so he dictated a letter, and the African American History Museum in Dallas has that letter. And in that letter, he dictates, he says, thank you so much for standing up for the rights of my people, but you don't realize your company is doing even more than what you could be doing in terms of marching or advocating. Because as you transform our lives and you lift us up, we become a force, we become empowered, we become something that can be reckoned with. Well, in the future, that philosophy in 7-Eleven became one of the first DEI because they called it equal opportunity employment. And now one of the things I'm the proudest of is my family, when I go to Norway or I go to any other place where my grandfather never dreamed 7-Eleven would be, quite often it is the first job an immigrant ever has. And now that becomes DEI, but it began to equal opportunity employment. The reason why I share this story with you today is because a lot of times we see things in the news, we go, God, why can't I do something? But business is a tool. And as I tell people all the time, if I have a hammer, I can kill you with it, or I can build something with it. The hammer is not evil. What are you doing with the hammer in your hands? Everything in your portfolio, everything in your bank account, every decision you make is deciding whether or not we're going to take responsibility for the potential impact. And in today's world, ignorance is a choice. Let me say that again. In today's world, with our access to the internet, our access to information, ignorance is a choice. We can remain there and we become part of the problem, or we can decide that we are going to educate ourselves about our impact. Am I going to manufacture something with slave labor? Or am I going to manufacture something in a way that uplifts an entire economy? Right now, one of the projects that I have is a company called Eco Green Energy with a friend of mine named Tanya Adriales Rodriguez. She's one of the leading green architects in the Yucatan. And something she did that was just amazing, separate from me, is she went in there and decided she was going to build a development project. But normally what would happen in the Yucatan is they would just raise everything to the ground and put concrete down, and then it would destroy it. And the very thing people would come, if you've ever seen a Food Loop box, to see the toucans on it. People would come to see the toucans, but they're all destroyed because they have no location, no environment. Because she took 6 months to look and see what was endangered in plants and animals, and she built around that understanding, she ended up having the first development ever that increased the rate of species that were actually going extinct in plant and animal. The reason I'm sharing these stories again is this is what is possible when you operate your business with purpose, awareness, and taking responsibility. Many of us labor under the idea that you have to be a world leader to affect great change. But every one of you today has a business in this room. That's why you're in here. If you have a business, you are making decisions about people's lives, how much food they can put on the table, what their impact in the world is. You're making decisions about how you shape your culture, how you shape your community, how you give voice and power to people that normally don't have it. And as women, we are in a position right now that our grandmothers could even dream of. In the United States right now, there are things that are happening that are terrifying for women. And this is that we have people that are saying, hey, let's make women go back to 1923 when we had to have our husbands sign on whether we can own property or whether we can have a bank account. If you aren't fighting that, you are empowered in ways that you should not take for granted. And take a look at what's happening in the US and recognize that if you hold on to this is something that is a legacy. We stand on the shoulders of so many women before us. Hold on to that, defend it, own it, and use it, because this is the power that can change the world. Thank you.